Hi everyone, this is Andrew Gibbons and welcome to the Body of Knowledge course. Today we're going to start with a short awareness through movement lesson that can be done in sitting. And the goals of the lesson are simple. They're to help you discover through the investigation of the lesson how to make your spine more flexible, longer, and stronger. And to do that, we're going to look at a very simple motion from about 2 or 3 different ways. And we're going to apply a couple of principles from the Feldenkrais method so you can see how to use the lesson to achieve those goals. So the lesson begins very simply. Take one of your hands, in this case my left hand, and you're going to place it gently on top of your head. Now for many people, the act of bringing their arm up to their head sometimes is enough of a burden. So just slowly a couple of times, bring your arm up. And you may want to notice whether the shoulder here, when you lift the arm, whether it tends to hoist up like this, or whether you can let the shoulder kind of sit down and stay calm a little bit longer as you lift your arm up onto the top of your head. And find a way to bring the hand just comfortably. You don't want the hand and the arm pulling or hanging off the head. Just place it very, very gently at the top. The movement you're going to explore is a movement that would take your ear, in this case my left ear, down in the direction of the left shoulder. How far should you go? For me, about that much is comfortable here at the beginning of the lesson. Of course, as you do the movement again several times, you can increase the distance as long as it's comfortable. The main thing you're looking for as you repeat the movement several times is you're looking to sense how the movement is distributed down through your spine, into your pelvis, and even including your legs as you make the movement. Now for most people, the beginning will look something just like this, which is a movement that has most of the bend occurring very high up in the spine, somewhere up in the vertebrae here, the neck, and not much taking place down below. Some of you will find that the neck doesn't really want to go that way very comfortably, and so the bend, you'll try to create the bend from further down here, or perhaps more in the middle of the rib cage, the middle of the spine, or sometimes higher up here. It doesn't really matter which one you tend to find yourself doing in the beginning. The idea here, and you can see I just took a little rest so that my arm can feel fresh again. The idea here is to begin to move the head in such a way that the movement is distributed throughout the length of the spine. That I make the shape for the movement with my whole body and not just with some little segment of my body. Okay? So let's let the arm rest again. Now, because this is not stretching and it's not an exercise class, we're actually interested in improving the quality of the pattern through the investigation of the lesson. So now we're going to look at what happens down in this lower part of the body, down here in the pelvis, and begin to lift one side of the pelvis off the chair a little bit. Just what's easy. Nothing too challenging. Just like somebody had a piece of paper. You can imagine if somebody had you were sitting on a magazine and it was just enough to let them pull it out, right? I put it in too far there. Yeah? So it's just a small movement. And you can see that it has something to do with the head tilting to the side. Now, you can tilt the head that way without the pelvis. And the point is to be able to feel in your sensation of the movement how the bending occurs in one particular place in the body, but doesn't necessarily include the lower half in the movement. So bring your hand back up, and this time start the movement by lifting the pelvis a little bit. And notice how that actually initiates the cascade of the movement through the spine to bring the head in that direction. And allow yourself to notice a couple of things. One, when the pelvis initiates the movement like this, is your neck more comfortable? Or is it more comfortable when you do it with no movement in the pelvis? And more importantly, can you simply feel the difference? Yeah? Good. Now rest a moment. Now, this is a short lesson, so we're just going to introduce some of the concepts, and you can practice them on your own. But in a longer lesson, we might take the time to initiate a few times from the top, a few times from the bottom, a few times somewhere in the middle, sort of drawing the bottom and the top together. The idea is really to manipulate your intention, in other words, where you actually want to begin the movement from, and then go back to just the head. Oh, I can already feel it in my neck. Or just the pelvis. Oh, I get a strange sort of shearing feeling across the lower part of my back. But when I do them together, something more harmonious starts to occur. Now you'll notice this isn't about trying to go farther and farther. The only reason you'd want to go farther and farther at this point is if it became more comfortable to go farther. There's nothing to be gained by forcing yourself or using willpower to overcome your discomfort. That's not the game we're playing right now. We're trying just to lay down a foundation of understanding this particular kind of pattern of movement in the spine so you can feel what it's like, and then to apply a couple of principles to what we're doing. Now, one of the main principles that we want to look at is how is the movement distributed throughout the entire length of the spine. So in the beginning, you may have noticed that your tendency was to bend more in one place than in any other. Maybe it was just up in the neck. Yeah. And then when we included the pelvis, you realized, oh, that could be actually part of the bending. Yeah. Now, this idea of the movement being distributed equitably is a kind of ideal that we work towards. It's not something that we may ever reach, but it's something that informs the quality of the movement that we make. Yeah? So you'll notice that behind me on the screen is a grid. It's very convenient because you can see this line about right here runs pretty much right across the top of my head. Now, if I bring my hand up again and I start to make the movement, even if I distribute it throughout my whole body, if I make the movement like this, you can see that my head actually falls away from this line here. In other words, I create the shape by actually compressing my spine a bit. I fold these ribs kind of bulge out a little bit. Nothing wrong with it. But as we work towards a more refined way of doing the movement, and certain kinds of biomechanical principles can point us in a direction along the path of developing our skill and refinement, you want to have in mind a particular principle. And that principle is that within the beginning of the movement becomes the possibility of lengthening your spine. Rather than shortening and compressing yourself to make the movement, it actually becomes possible to get taller to initiate the movement. Now, obviously, eventually when I bend, my head will come down a little bit. But you can see that this quality of movement is much different than just immediately compressing like this. And this is a very important difference to be able to sense. This difference between being able to bend my spine by compressing myself, where everything gets squished together, and the weight of my body becomes almost a burden guaranteed on certain parts of my back more than any other, versus a way of actually distributing the action so that I actually get a little bit longer. This is a way of actually preserving some of the spaces between each of the vertebrae in the back, and there's certain spaces in between the way the ribs move. And again, it's a way of more equitably distributing throughout the whole body the muscular forces, the muscular work that helps you be able to move like that. Okay? So take a few moments, bring your hand gently back to your head and then bring it down. See if even in the act of bringing your hand to the top of your head, you can actually grow a little taller. I know that might have been imperceptible, but I'll show you what happens for most people. When they bring the arm up, there's this. Look at the distance up here at the top of my head. As opposed to, I actually expand and lengthen as I bring my arm up. The arm weighs a certain amount, and as you lift it away from the center of the body, you want the center of the body to be responsive to that weight moving through space, rather than that weight in the middle of the body compressing in response to stabilize to be able to lift the arm. So see if a few times you can try with the other arm. Just imagine lifting your head, the crown of your head a tiny bit, almost as if you were trying to raise your spine to meet your hand. And then do it a few times where you shrink down so you can really feel the difference. For some people, this is actually more what they're used to. It's more familiar. It may even be more comfortable. You might not have the particular skills yet to understand how to lengthen your spine, but I promise you, they're on the way. So now that you've been able to lengthen a little bit to meet your hand, now have the idea that as you bend your head to the side, you're actually going to look for this lengthening quality throughout each degree of the movement. You may find that your legs and your pelvis suddenly become much more awake, much more involved, much more included in the pattern from the very beginning than they were before. And you can actually begin to feel the folding process along the side, these ribs getting closer together. You see if it actually feels, in some way, safer for the ribs to fold like this when you have the lengthening of your spine in your image of the movement. That's nice. Now take a moment just to rest. Give yourself the time to actually sense now. Do you feel like one side of your body is a little bit longer than the other? This may not be noticeable to you from the camera, but there's certainly going to be muscular synergies that have been changed a little bit just based on the side that you've been working on. And you want to be able to taste those particular differences as they come up during the lesson. Bring your other arm slowly up to your head. Slowly bring the ear towards the shoulder. It's a funny thing how words and language can actually change the way that you do something. If instead of bringing your ear towards your shoulder, if the instruction changed and said bring your ear down towards your hip, how does that change your internal image of the movement? What parts of yourself do you start to notice further down along the side of the abdomen and alongside the back, as opposed to ear towards the shoulder compared to ear towards the hip? Now, if you need to rest your arm, go ahead and rest your arm for a moment. Now begin lifting your hip. You don't have to do anything at all with your head, but simply notice that there's a connection between the movement that would lift one hip away from the chair, away from the surface that you're sitting on. There's something about that elicits a change in the orientation of your head. Now, almost nobody is symmetrical, so it may be that you end up doing this. You may lift your hip and end up kind of tilting that way. It may be that this side of the neck doesn't really have the capacity to bend, or you might have to really pay closer attention to it to start to involve this side in bending and this side in lengthening. That's good. And let your arm rest for a moment. The differences that you may feel from one side to another, they're actually part of the lesson. They're part of the journey that you go on in the lessons in awareness and movement, because you're investigating rather closely your experience step by step as you go. And you're going to uncover some facts that, generally speaking, remain hidden in your muscular habit throughout the day. So just know that it's okay that you're not symmetrical, and that just be open to the possibility that the lessons will actually start to change the image of you have of the way you move. And you may find that that sense of asymmetry may change a little bit as you learn to know what you're doing. So now let's revisit this idea of the spine compressing so that you actually fall into yourself to make the bend. And that produces a certain kind of pressure, I feel, there on the bone that I sit on underneath my pelvis there. There's a certain way that compressive quality presses and sags down into that hip joint or that side of my lower back. And I don't like it so much, to tell you the truth. And let's see if we start to lengthen. This is, first of all, a challenge for me to do. Because now I have to find a way to use the pressure against the seat to actually lift myself up in more of an arc. And I'm actually aware, one of the differences that's easy for me to sense here, when I compress, the middle of my chest just kind of shifts on over and it falls down in this direction. When I lengthen, I really have to take this side of my chest and my back, the ribs underneath this armpit, and I really have to be conscious of getting longer and taller upward so that the dimensions of the movement actually change. That's nice. That's different. That's actually much more pleasant for me than compressing down into it like this. Yeah? Take another rest. Turn your head a little bit left and right. Notice if the movements you've been doing, these bending movements, they're actually a part of moving your head in space, to look at things, to see the pictures on the walls, to see out the windows. When you look down at your shoe, or you're looking to see if the shoelace came untied, these kinds of things. These kinds of bending patterns are embedded in all kinds of activities throughout the day. Now that's a very basic kind of structure to the lesson. We do this, we do this, we notice the difference between compressing to do it versus lengthening to do it, and we do it on the other side. But let's introduce one more set of variations. And the variation is going to be that we actually support ourselves only on one part of the pelvis. So I only have one sit bone on the chair, and the other one is completely off. Yeah? Now, for those of you that have never done this before, this can feel a bit precarious. So number one, the buttock that's off the chair, you really need to have this leg stable underneath you. You don't want to have this leg kind of off to the side or somewhere random where you feel like you're collapsing and you're falling. You really want to figure out where you should put it so you can be safe. Yeah? And you may get tired, so you may need to rest. And if that feels too precarious to you, you can take a book that you have, place it on the chair, but just make sure that it's only underneath, well, I guess since my left buttock was off the chair, it's only underneath the right. So now, there's the chair underneath the left side. But now I've created so that even if I get uncomfortable and I fall, I'm only going to fall a little bit. So this might be a little bit easier to handle for some of you. So just so you know, it's an option out there. Okay? So you arrange yourself as you need so that you only have one buttock supported on the chair. Make sure your legs are nice and stable. If you need to put them wider apart, that's totally fine. Now, bring up the arm of the side of the pelvis that's on the chair. And now, take the side of the pelvis that's off the chair and begin to slowly lower it down towards the floor. And again, pay attention to your head. Notice that there's something in the phenomenon of the pelvis lowering like this that actually it needs the tilting of the head to provide the slack, to provide the space, provide the shape in the spine that allows the pelvis to move in that direction. And all you need to do is keep your head on the horizon this time and lower your pelvis just the amount that it can comfortably. And notice how it's actually limited. But once the head is allowed to go over to the side, you'll see how much further the pelvis can go. And then, of course, you can lift that side of the pelvis. And as long as the head accompanies the movement of the pelvis, and you feel safe, and moment by moment you can feel where you are in space, and then you can feel throughout that you really need this leg, and you need this side of the pelvis. This leg is actually quite free to lift, but this one, no way. As long as you can feel where your points of support are, you can actually improve the relationship between the bottom and the top. That's nice. Excellent. After you've done that a few times, bring the chair back underneath you evenly. And once again, check in with your sensation now of which side of the spine feels longer. For me, at this moment, it feels like this side is a lot longer. But some of you might have the experience that actually the side that was supported on the chair, something there was clarified. Either one is fine. Take the stool, move it to the other side, or if you have the book, now you would put the book underneath this side of your pelvis. And it doesn't have to be a thick book. It can be a very thin book too. Take the arm that's on the same side as the pelvis is on the chair or on the book. Slowly begin to lower the side that's out over the chair, that's not supported. How far should you go? How fast you should go? You want to go at the speed that you can pay attention. You don't want to go fast. There's no value to doing this ballistically or gymnastically. This is a very interesting experience. This side of the back has a completely different story to it. And you'll notice that also, even though this side of the pelvis is definitely going this way, and there is something about that that's going to pull the spine downward, it's still useful to use this principle of lengthening to create the movement so that you're creating space up through the vertebrae of this side, and you continue to try to have them participate and maintain space as you go. Now, for those of you that are a little more adventurous, here's one more variation you can do. Once you've folded to the side, keep your head here and lift the pelvis a little bit and bring it back down. And lift the pelvis a little bit and bring it back down, but don't change the head. And you'll be able to sense how limited that movement in the lower back is with the head fixed in this position. Should you use a lot of force? Absolutely not. Now go ahead and let the head move as the pelvis lifts. And you'll see how closely related they are. The function of the pelvis absolutely requires the organization of the head, and vice versa. You could be here and try to bring your head back to the middle without your pelvis. Oh, arm is getting tired. Neck feeling the extra work there. So much easier when the entire spine organizes the pattern to bring the head back to the horizon or even further. Okay? Take a moment. If you need to lie down on the floor and rest after these repetitions, it's fine. But just take a moment now and notice the way you feel sitting in the chair. See if you have a little bit more of a sense of stability or of evenness between the two sides. Even the sense of the reciprocal nature, that when you bend to one side, you bring the ribs together and the other side opens. Even this can be a lovely revelation, a more three-dimensional image to take with you as you move. If you want a sort of a a unifying idea. One elbow down, one elbow up. Do it without lifting the pelvis. And allow yourself to feel the limitation. Try not to blast through the limitation. Just feel that it limits you. And then go ahead and include the pelvis. And again, look for ways of lengthening to make the movement rather than ways of shortening to make the movement. Ways that make you taller. 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 Okay? Rest for a moment on the chair. Turn yourself. Look around a little bit. See what it's like to stand up and walk around now. And enjoy the new sensation you have. Don't head right back into the next thing you were going to do today. Just take a moment to, again, taste what you did. And I'll see you back here next time for the Body of Knowledge course. I'm Andrew Gibbons. Thank you.